Hello class and welcome to chapter 4. In this chapter we're going to be talking about environmental scanning. So let's get started. Environmental scanning refers to the monitoring, the evaluation, and the sharing of information about activities and events that are taking place outside the company and making sure that information gets converted into useful information within the company. So it's taking that information from outside and making sure that the key people within the organization have that information and can use it for building strategies, improving company policies, and etc. Now, when we talk about the external environment, we're talking about the natural environment, societal environment, and task environment. These three things should sound somewhat familiar to you because we did cover them earlier in chapter 1. The natural environment, referring to large, big, whole-scale activities that are outside the organization that you have very little, actually no control over at all. Societal environment, these are large macroeconomic activities, once again, that organizations have very little control over. And then you have third, the task environment, which refer to activities and entities that are outside the organization, which you have some influence on. You don't control them, but you can influence them. Let's take a closer look. The natural environment refers to things like physical resources, wildlife, climate. So the global warming, for example, would be a good illustration of the natural environment. No one company can control or really even influence at all global warming. What we can do is try to work together as a global community to try to combat global warming, but it's near impossible to do for any one country, let alone one organization to do on its own. So we're talking about large macro scale things in that nature. The societal environment are also large macro scale things, not quite as big as the natural environment or things that refer to nature, but we're looking here like economic forces, technological forces, political legal forces, social cultural forces. For example, in the most recent election in the United States, Trump was elected president. Well, there are certain political changes that are going to happen because he's the president now and his administration has come into power. No one single organization can stop those things. The best you could do is try to understand those political changes and policies and adapt your strategy accordingly. The task environment, as we discussed earlier, contains activities that you actually can influence. You can't control them, but you can influence them. For example, suppliers, competitors, customers. You have some influence over what they do and how they interact with your business. Customers, for example, you can run a promotion, a marketing. You can market a promotion. You can market certain product features. You can take certain product features out. You can raise or lower your prices. All this has influence on what customers do. It also influences what competitors do as well. With suppliers, you could have policies that support and empower your network. You could have policies which strive to keep your margins in place, even at the expense of your network. You can operate and interact with any of these entities within the task environment and try to influence the nature of the relationship. So the whole point about environmental scanning is that we're looking across all those different entities in the task environment, the natural environment, the societal environment. We're gathering important information and we're drilling that information down into the company so that we can make proper business decisions. It's also important to note that while we're gathering information in the task environment and the other levels that we discussed, that we look at the environment as an industry. Every industry is unique and different. They have their own ups and downs. They have their own uniquenesses, which says, hey, if we're going to do environmental scanning, we need to look in these various areas. So this slide here is talking about why it's important to do what we call industry analysis. There are so many different industries. You have banking industry, real estate industry, airlines, automobiles, consumer industry. There are tons of industry. This is just a handful of them. But if you're going to do environmental scanning, you need to look at activities that are taking place within your industry, as well as just the task environment, the natural environment, things that affect every industry. Now here's a framework that the book gives you to help you with environmental scanning. It's called the STEEP analysis, and it says that the basic crux of it is that it's an acronym that contains all the key areas that you need to take a look at within the task environment, the natural environment, and so on. And it says that we should monitor these different components to ensure that we have a good understanding of what's going on in each of them. so we could drive that information back into the organization and make proper business decisions. So sociocultural, technological, economical, ecological, and political legal forces. This slide here gives you examples of each of those categories. Now, I'm not going to go through every item on this slide. That would be way too long for the purpose of this lecture. So take time. I'd suggest that you pause the slide and read through these so you have a good idea of what type of categories or what type of activities fall within each category. With that said, that wraps up this lecture. I hope you've learned something. Don't forget to study, and I'll see you next time.